The auction hall reeked of sweat and desperation. Eleanor pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her fingers clutching the thin fabric of her mourning dress as merchants and minor lords circled the platform like carrion birds. The iron chandelier above swayed with each gust of wind that slipped through the cracked windows, casting shadows that danced across faces twisted with greed or indifference. She shouldn't be here, not standing in a line of orphaned girls and debtors, waiting to be sold like livestock to satisfy the creditors who'd descended upon her father's estate the moment they'd lowered his coffin into the ground. 3 weeks. That's all it had taken for everything to crumble. Lot 17, the auctioneer called, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Eleanor Ashford, daughter of the late physician Marcus Ashford, 18 years of age, educated in medicine and herbology. Opening bid, 50 crowns. Eleanor's breath caught. 50 crowns wouldn't even cover a quarter of her father's debts. She'd be sold to whoever could afford her, bound to servitude for years or worse. The bidding began slowly. A merchant raised his hand, then a tavern keeper with yellow teeth and wandering eyes. Eleanor's stomach churned as the numbers climbed with agonizing slowness. 60, 70, 85 crowns. Then the temperature in the room dropped. It happened so suddenly that Eleanor saw her own breath mist in the air. The candles guttered, and conversation died as every head turned toward the entrance. He stood in the doorway like a portrait painted in shadows and moonlight. Tall, impossibly still, dressed in black velvet that seemed to absorb what little light remained in the hall. His face was carved from marble sharp cheekbones, a mouth that suggested both cruelty and restraint, and eyes the color of winter storms that swept across the crowd with predatory assessment. Eleanor felt those eyes land on her, and her pulse stuttered. 500 crowns, he said, his voice a low resonance that seemed to vibrate through her bones. The auctioneer nearly dropped his gavel. "My lord, Lord Ravencroft, we were not expecting 500, he repeated, each word precise and final. "For the physician's daughter." Silence crashed through the hall. No one challenged him. No one even breathed too loudly. Eleanor's legs threatened to give out. Lord Ravencroft. She knew that name, the way one knew old curses and ghost stories. A family that lived in the ancestral estate beyond the Thornwood Forest, rarely seen, never approached without invitation. Her father had warned her once, years ago, never to wander near their lands after dark. "Some debts are paid in coin," he'd whispered. "Others in blood." The auctioneer cleared his throat, his hand trembling as he raised the gavel. Going once. Going twice. He glanced around the room, but every other bidder had suddenly found somewhere else to look. Sold to Lord Ravencroft. The crack of wood on wood sealed her fate. Eleanor's hands were shaking as they unchained her from the line and led her toward the stranger who'd purchased her freedom, or perhaps something far worse. Up close, he was even more unsettling. His skin held no warmth, no flush of life, and when he moved, it was with a predator's liquid grace that made her instincts scream to run. But there was nowhere to run, not anymore. "You will address me as Lord Ravencroft," he said, not looking at her as he turned toward the door. "Collect whatever belongings you possess. We leave immediately." "I have nothing," Eleanor managed, hating how small her voice sounded. "They took everything to settle the debts." For the first time, he looked directly at her. His eyes held an ancient weight that made her feel like she was drowning in deep water. Something flickered in that gaze recognition, curiosity, before his expression shuddered once more. "Then you have nothing to delay us." He gestured toward the door. "Come." The carriage waiting outside was as black as his attire, drawn by horses that stamped nervously against the cobblestones. Eleanor climbed inside on unsteady legs, the scent of leather and something darker, copper, iron, old stone filling her nostrils as Lord Ravencroft settled across from her. The door closed with a definitive click. As the carriage lurched forward, Eleanor pressed her hand against the window, watching the only town she'd ever known disappear into the darkness behind them. The auction hall's lights faded, and soon there was nothing but the road ahead and the sound of wheels on gravel. "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Why would you pay so much for me?" Lord Ravencroft was silent for so long that Eleanor thought he wouldn't answer. The carriage swayed as they turned onto a rougher road, heading toward the forest that marked the boundary between the mortal world and whatever lay beyond. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I saw what they could not." "What?" Eleanor leaned forward, her heart hammering. What did you see? His eyes caught the moonlight streaming through the window, reflecting silver like a wolf's. When he smiled, it was not a kind expression, but it wasn't cruel either. It was something caught between longing and damnation. Your soul, he said softly, burning bright enough to illuminate 3 centuries of darkness. The forest swallowed them whole, and Eleanor realized with crystalline clarity that she was traveling into a fairy tale, one that might not have a happy ending. But as she held Lord Ravencroft's ancient gaze, she understood something else. Whatever he was, whatever darkness claimed him, he had just offered her something no one else in that auction hall could. A choice. What happens now? She asked. His smile deepened, revealing teeth just a fraction too sharp in the moonlight. Now, Miss Ashford, you learn what it means to be claimed by the Prince of Cast, Thorns, and whether you have the courage to become his queen. The carriage plunged deeper into the woods, and Eleanor's old life burned away behind her like paper catching flame. The gates of Ravencroft Manor rose from the mist like the ribcage of some long-dead beast. Eleanor pressed her face closer to the carriage window, her breath fogging the glass as iron spires materialized through the darkness. The estate sprawled across the hillside in impossible architecture towers that seemed to defy gravity, bridges connecting nothing to nowhere, and windows that glowed with a pale, sickly light that had nothing to do with candles or hearth fires. Beautiful, isn't it? Lord Ravencroft's voice cut through her fascination. In the way that graveyards are beautiful, all that potential for peace, spoiled by what lies beneath. Eleanor turned to face him. Is that what you are? Something spoiled beneath a beautiful surface? His eyebrow arched, and for a moment, something almost like amusement flickered across his features. Direct. I appreciate that. Most mortals I encounter are too terrified to speak plainly. I'm terrified, Eleanor admitted, surprised by her own honesty. But fear hasn't made me mute yet. The carriage jerked to a halt before she could say more. The door swung open, not by any visible hand, and a blast of cold air invaded the space between them. It smelled of rain-soaked stone and something Eleanor's medical training couldn't quite name ancient decay preserved rather than rotting. Lord Ravencroft descended first, then offered his hand. Eleanor hesitated only a heartbeat before accepting. His fingers were ice against her palm, hard as marble and just as unyielding. The moment their skin touched, something electric shot up her arm, not painful, but startling enough that she gasped. He released her immediately, his jaw tightening. Forgive me. Sometimes I forget how intense the contact can be. Eleanor flexed her fingers, still feeling the phantom chill. What was that? Recognition, he said simply. Then turned toward the massive oak doors that dominated the entrance. They opened at his approach, revealing a grand foyer illuminated by hundreds of candles floating in midair, their flames motionless despite the draft. The interior was a study in contradictions. Opulent Persian rugs lay across stone floors, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Tapestries depicting battles and courtly scenes hung beside empty portrait frames, as if someone had systematically removed every face. A grand staircase curved upward into shadows that seemed too thick to be natural. Welcome to your new home, Miss Ashford. Lord Ravencroft removed his cloak with a fluid motion, and Eleanor caught her first clear glimpse of him in better light. He was devastating. Not handsome in any conventional sense, his features were too sharp, too predatory for that, but compelling in a way that made it impossible to look away. Dark hair fell past his collar, framing a face that could have been 30 or 300. Only his eyes betrayed his true nature, ancient, haunted, and far too knowing. How long? Eleanor asked, the question tumbling out before she could stop it. How long have you been? What you are? His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. 347 years. Give or take a decade. Time becomes fluid when you have too much of it. 347 years. Eleanor's mind reeled. When he'd been born, made her country hadn't even existed yet. Wars had risen and fallen. Plagues had swept the land. Empires had crumbled, all while he remained unchanged. Why am I here? She forced herself to meet his gaze. The truth this time. Not riddles about souls and burning light. Lord Ravencroft moved to a side table where crystal decanters sat like frozen tears. He poured something dark and viscous into a single glass, not wine, Eleanor realized with creeping horror. Something thicker. Because you are dying, he said without preamble. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? The cough you've been suppressing since the auction. The way you favor your left side when you breathe. The slight tremor in your hands that you hide by clasping them together. He turned to face her, the glass untouched in his hand. Your father was a physician. Did you truly think he died of natural causes? Eleanor's world tilted. The fever, everyone said it was a fever. It was poison. Lord Ravencroft interrupted, his voice gentling slightly. Slow acting. Methodical. The same poison now working through your bloodstream. Your father discovered something he shouldn't have treated, someone he shouldn't have saved. His reward was death. Yours was meant to follow within the month. The room spun. Eleanor groped for the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Her father, murdered. Herself, poisoned. Everything she'd believed about the past 3 weeks crumbled into ash. How do you know this? She whispered. Because I was the one your father saved. Lord Ravencroft set down the glass with deliberate care. 20 years ago, hunters cornered me in your village. I was wounded, weakened, desperate. Your father found me in his surgery and made a choice that sealed both your fates. Eleanor's hands fisted in her skirts. He saved a vampire. He saved a life. The fact that it was an immortal life made no difference to him. Lord Ravencroft's expression softened into something that might have been grief. Marcus Ashford was a good man in a world that punishes goodness. When I learned what had been done to him to you, I made my own choice. To buy me at auction like a prize mare? To offer you what I offered no one else in 3 centuries. He crossed the space between them, kneeling so they were eye level. This close, Eleanor could see flecks of silver in his storm-gray eyes, constellations of ancient sorrow. A cure for the poison. A chance at life, mortal or otherwise. Eleanor's breath caught. What's the price? Stay with me, he said softly. Not as a servant or prisoner, as something I haven't had in longer than you've been alive. What? His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. The air between them crackled with the same electricity she'd felt in the carriage. Hope, Lord Ravencroft whispered. Stay with me, Eleanor Ashford, and let me remember what it means to protect something worth more than immortality. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across his face, a face that had seen empires fall and still chose to kneel before a dying girl. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat precious and numbered. How long do I have? She asked. To decide? His smile was sad, beautiful, and terrible all at once. Until midnight tomorrow. After that, the poison will have spread too far for even my blood to cure. The clock somewhere in the castle began to chime, counting down the hours she had left. Eleanor didn't sleep. How could she, knowing poison coursed through her veins with every heartbeat? She lay in the chamber Lord Ravencroft had given her, a room of velvet curtains and ancient furniture that smelled of lavender and dust, watching moonlight paint silver patterns across the ceiling. Until midnight tomorrow. 24 hours to choose between death and... What? Immortality bound to a creature who'd lived longer than her bloodline? A cure purchased with servitude disguised as companionship? Or perhaps something her rational mind couldn't quite categorize, something that had sparked between them when their hands touched, when his eyes had found hers in that auction hall and seen past flesh and bone to whatever lay beneath. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Miss Ashford? A woman's voice, gentle and surprisingly warm. May I enter? Eleanor sat up, pulling the borrowed nightgown tighter around her shoulders. Yes. The door opened to reveal a woman who couldn't have been more than 30, with copper hair braided down her back and eyes the color of autumn leaves. She carried a tray laden with tea and what looked like fresh bread, impossible luxuries at this hour. I'm Margot, the woman said, setting the tray on the bedside table. I manage the household. Lord Ravencroft thought you might need something to settle your nerves. She paused, her gaze assessing but not unkind. He also thought you'd have questions you might ask more freely of someone other than himself. Eleanor's fingers twisted in the sheets. Are you human? Yes. Margot poured the tea with practiced ease. I've served the Ravencroft family for 15 years. My choice, freely made and renewed each year. Why? The word burst out sharper than Eleanor intended. Why would anyone choose to live with? She caught herself, but Margot merely smiled. With a vampire? Margot finished calmly. Because Lord Ravencroft saved my daughter when human physicians gave up hope. Because he pays fairly, and treats his staff with more dignity than most mortal lords. Because in 15 years, he's never taken blood without permission or used his power to compel obedience. She met Eleanor's gaze directly. He's not what the stories claim, Miss Ashford. He's something far more complicated. Eleanor accepted the teacup, the warmth seeping into her chilled fingers. He told me I'm dying, that my father was murdered. Both true. Margot's expression grew somber. The poisoning was discovered too late to prevent it, but Lord Ravencroft has resources beyond mortal medicine. His blood, given willingly, can purge toxins that would kill any ordinary person. At what cost? Eleanor whispered. What does his blood do besides heal? Margot hesitated, and in that pause, Eleanor understood that whatever came next was the truth Ravencroft had been dancing around. It creates a bond, Margot said finally. Not a complete transformation. You'd remain mortal unless you chose otherwise, but a connection. You'd feel his emotions at their strongest. He'd sense when you were in danger. The bond fades over months if not renewed, but while it lasts... She trailed off, searching for words. While it lasts, you'd understand what he is in ways no human normally could. Eleanor's hand trembled, tea sloshing dangerously close to the rim. He wants to bind me to him. He wants to save you, Margot corrected gently. The bond is a consequence, not the goal. But yes, you deserve to know all of it before you choose. The clock in the hallway chimed 2. 22 hours left. Eleanor set down the cup before she could drop it. I need to see him. Now. She found Lord Ravencroft in what Margot called the observatory, a glass-domed room at the castle's highest point, where telescopes pointed toward stars that seemed close enough to touch. He stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, silhouette stark, against the cosmos. You should be resting, he said without turning. I should be dead. Eleanor closed the door, her bare feet silent on cold marble. Or perhaps I already am, and this is some fevered hallucination before the end. He turned then, and the moonlight caught the planes of his face in harsh relief. You're very much alive, Eleanor. I can hear your heart from here fighting, refusing to surrender even as the poison spreads. Margot told me about the bond. She forced herself to move closer, to not let fear root her in place. Why didn't you? Because I wanted you to choose life first, complications second. His jaw tightened. I've lived long enough to know that people make better decisions when fear doesn't cloud their judgment. And you think learning I'll be psychically tethered to a vampire won't cloud my bond? Judgment? Eleanor's laugh came out bitter. You're 3 centuries old and still understand nothing about human nature. Something flashed in his eyes, anger. Or hurt, she couldn't tell. Then enlighten me, physician's daughter. What would you have me do? Let you die to preserve your independence? Watch another person, He stopped abruptly, turning back to the window. Another person, you what? Eleanor pressed, drawn forward by the raw emotion in his voice. Another person I failed to save, he finished, but the words felt wrong, edited. Eleanor reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. The same electric shock jolted through her, stronger this time, and suddenly she felt it a vast, howling loneliness that made her own grief seem small by comparison. 300 years of isolation, of watching everyone he'd ever cared for wither and die while he remained frozen in time. He jerked away as if burned. Don't. Don't what? Touch you? Feel what you feel? Eleanor's voice rose. You're asking me to bind myself to you, but you won't let me know what I'm binding myself to? You can't possibly understand, then help me understand. She grabbed his arm properly this time, holding on despite the cold that seeped through the fabric. Stop protecting me from the truth and just tell me. Why me? Why now? What do you really want? Lord Ravencroft went very still. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I want to stop being alone, he said. I want to remember what it feels like to have someone look at me and see a man instead of a monster. I want. He turned, and the naked vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. I want what I can never have, a companion who chooses me not because I compelled them or saved them or bought them, but because they see all of what I am and stay anyway. Eleanor's throat tightened. And if I take your blood? If I let you save me? What happens to that choice? His hand lifted, cupping her face with infinite gentleness. His palm was ice against her fever-warm skin. Then you'll have time to make it properly, he whispered. Free of poison, free of death's shadow. And If you choose to leave after I'll let you go. You swear it? On every life I've taken, he said. On every dawn I'll never see again. I swear it, Eleanor Ashford. The clock began to chime 3. Eleanor leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the supernatural cold, the ancient sorrow, the desperate hope that radiated from him like heat. Then save me, she breathed, and we'll see what comes after. His eyes flared silver, and he smiled sharp, beautiful, and finally, blessedly honest. As you wish, my brave fool. Lord Ravenscroft led her to a different chamber one Eleanor hadn't seen in her brief tour of the castle. It was smaller than the others, almost intimate, with walls lined in leather-bound books and a fireplace where flames danced without consuming the logs beneath. A chaise lounge upholstered in deep crimson velvet dominated the center of the room, and beside it, a small table held crystal glasses and a silver blade that gleamed in the firelight. Eleanor's steps faltered at the threshold. What is this place? My private sanctuary, he gestured for her to enter. The only room in this entire castle where I permit myself to be vulnerable. The word seemed strange coming from him, this creature of shadow and ancient power speaking of vulnerability as if he understood it the way mortals did. But perhaps he did. Perhaps immortality was its own kind of wound. Eleanor crossed the threshold, and the door closed behind her with a soft click that felt final. How does this work? She asked, hating the tremor in her voice. The blood exchange? Lord Ravenscroft moved to the table, his fingers hovering over the silver blade. I'll open a vein. You'll drink. Not much, 3 mouthfuls at most. Any more and the bond becomes, he paused, searching for words. Permanent. Unbreakable. I won't risk that without your full consent. And it will cure the poison? Within hours. He picked up the blade, testing its edge against his thumb. A bead of dark blood welled up, and Eleanor watched it slide down his pale skin like a garnish of rubies. My blood recognizes toxins as invaders. It will hunt them through your system and destroy them. Eleanor's medical training warred with instinctive revulsion. She'd spent years learning to heal, to preserve life through science and herbcraft. This was something else entirely, ancient magic dressed in biological terms. Will it hurt? She whispered. His expression softened. No. Most describe it as intense, overwhelming, but not painful. He moved to the chaise, sitting with preternatural grace. Come here, Eleanor. She approached on legs that felt disconnected from her body. When she settled beside him, the velvet was soft as sin beneath her, and his proximity filled her senses. Cold stone, winter rain, and something darker that made her pulse quicken. Look at me, he commanded gently. Eleanor raised her eyes to his, and the world narrowed to that storm-gray gaze. I need you to understand something before we begin. His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together despite the cold. Once you taste my blood, you'll feel everything I feel in that moment. 3 centuries of loneliness, yes, but also. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Also what I feel when I look at you. Her breath caught. What do you feel? Hope, he said simply. Terror. The first stirrings of something I thought I'd forgotten how to feel. His free hand lifted the blade. Are you certain, Eleanor? There's no shame in refusing. I can find another way. There is no other way. Eleanor squeezed his fingers, drawing courage from the connection. And I'm tired of running from fate. Do it. Lord Ravenscroft held her gaze a moment longer, as if memorizing her face, then brought the blade to his wrist. The cut was precise, surgical, and the blood that welled up was darker than human blood, almost black in the firelight. Drink, he whispered, bringing his wrist to her lips. And don't be afraid of what you see. Eleanor closed her eyes and drank. The first taste was copper and ice, sliding down her throat like liquid midnight. Then the world exploded. She was flying through centuries of memory that weren't hers. A grand ballroom where he danced with a woman in white who crumbled to dust even as he held her. Battlefields soaked in blood where he'd walked among the dying, granting mercy to those beyond saving. A child's laughter that faded into silence as decades passed, and the child grew old while he remained unchanged. Loneliness like an ocean, vast and drowning. But beneath it, something else. Something new and fragile and achingly tender. Her. Eleanor saw herself through his eyes, standing in that auction hall with her chin raised despite her terror, asking him direct questions in the carriage when others would have cowered, touching his arm in the observatory and refusing to flinch from what she felt. She saw herself as something precious, something worth saving not out of debt or obligation, but because in 347 years of darkness, she was the first light he'd wanted to move toward instead of away from. The second mouthful brought sensation, the feeling of her heartbeat resonating through his entire being, the warmth of her mortal body a benediction against his eternal cold, the scent of her skin like spring rain after endless winter. "Stay," his thoughts whispered, intimate as a caress. "Please stay." The third mouthful was pure emotion, raw and unfiltered. Desire, not just physical, though that was there too, a hunger that went beyond blood to something deeper, more consuming, but also tenderness, protectiveness, and the desperate, terrifying hope that maybe, after all this time, he'd found someone who could see past the monster to the man who'd been lost beneath. Eleanor pulled back, gasping, and the connection snapped like a cut string. The room spun. Her body felt too hot, too alive, every nerve-ending firing at once. Lord Ravencroft caught her as she swayed, cradling her against his chest as her blood, human and vampire mixed, now began its work. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you, brave girl. Just breathe." Eleanor pressed her face to his shoulder, feeling his non-existent heartbeat, feeling the void where warmth should be, feeling the desperate tenderness with which he held her as if she were made of spun glass. "I saw," she gasped. "I saw everything. What you feel, what you want, I know." His arms tightened. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you how intense. Don't apologize." Eleanor pulled back enough to meet his eyes, seeing them now with new understanding. "Don't you dare apologize for feeling." Something broke in his expression, some carefully maintained wall crumbling to reveal the raw need beneath. "Eleanor, I'm not afraid of you," she interrupted. "Not anymore. How can I be afraid of someone who's been alone for 300 years and chose gentleness anyway?" His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "You don't know what you're saying. The bond, it's affecting your judgment. The bond is letting me see the truth," Eleanor countered. "And the truth is that you're not a monster. You're just lonely." Lord Ravencroft's eyes shimmered silver, and for the first time, Eleanor realized that vampires could weep. "What have you done to me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "In 2 days, you've undone 3 centuries of carefully constructed distance." Eleanor felt the poison burning away inside her, felt her body growing stronger with each passing second, felt the bond settling into place like a golden thread connecting her heart to his. "I've done nothing," she said softly, "except refuse to let you hide." He laughed, a sound caught between joy and despair, and pressed his forehead to hers. "You're going to destroy me," he murmured, utterly and deathlike, completely. Eleanor smiled, feeling alive for the first time since her father's death. "Good," she whispered. "Then we'll be even." Eleanor woke to the scent of roses and blood. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came rushing back, the blood exchange, the overwhelming flood of Ravencroft's emotions, the feeling of his arms around her as the poison burned away, and something new took root in her veins. She sat up slowly, testing her body. The cough was gone. The tremor in her hands had vanished. Even the persistent ache in her side had disappeared, leaving her feeling stronger than she had in months. Alive. The chamber door opened, and Margot entered carrying a breakfast tray. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Eleanor sitting upright. "You're awake. I wasn't sure, Lord Ravencroft said you might sleep through the day." She set the tray down, studying Eleanor with open curiosity. "How do you feel?" "Different." Eleanor flexed her fingers, watching them move with newfound strength. "Sharper, somehow, like someone turned up the contrast on the world. That's the bond settling." Margot poured tea with practiced efficiency. "Your senses will be heightened for a few days. You'll hear things you didn't before, smell things more acutely. It fades somewhat, but you'll always be more attuned than you were." Eleanor accepted the cup, and immediately noticed details she'd missed before the slight tremor in Margot's hand. The worry lines creased around her eyes, the way she kept glancing toward the window where late afternoon sun streamed through. "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked. Margot's professional mask slipped. "There are visitors. They arrived an hour ago, demanding an audience with Lord Ravencroft." "Visitors?" Eleanor's stomach clenched. What kind of visitors? The dangerous kind. Margot lowered her voice. The Order of the Silver Dawn. They're vampire hunters, Miss Ashford, and they don't make social calls. The tea turned to ash in Eleanor's mouth. Where is he? In the Great Hall, stalling, but they're insistent. They claim they're tracking a murderer, a vampire who killed a merchant family 3 towns over. Margot's hands twisted in her apron. Lord Ravencroft hasn't left the estate in weeks. It's impossible that he... But they don't care about truth, do they? Eleanor set down the cup, her mind racing with possibilities and dangers. They see a vampire and assume guilt. Exactly. Margot moved to the wardrobe, pulling out a deep blue dress that looked far too fine for borrowed clothing. You should stay here, out of sight. If they discover what you are to him, what I am to him, Eleanor repeated, something sharp and possessive flaring in her chest. Bound to him by blood, they'll use you as leverage or... Margot's face paled. Or worse, the Order believes that any mortal who willingly consorts with vampires is tainted. They'd kill you as quickly as they'd stake him. Eleanor stood, the room swaying slightly before her enhanced senses adjusted. Through the bond, she felt something that made her blood run cold. Lord Ravencroft's carefully controlled fear. Not for himself, she understood that instantly, but for her. I'm not hiding, Eleanor said flatly. Miss Ashford, he saved my life. Eleanor took the dress from Margot's hands. I won't cower in his castle while hunters threaten him with false accusations. Help me dress. Margot looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Eleanor's expression must have convinced her. She nodded once, sharply, and began unfastening the nightgown's buttons. The great hall was a study in tension. Eleanor descended the stairs quietly, keeping to the shadows as she took in the scene below. Lord Ravencroft stood at the center of the hall, every inch the aristocratic lord in his dark formal attire. But Eleanor could feel the coiled danger beneath his civilized veneer, the predator calculating distances and vulnerabilities. Facing him were 5 figures in silver-trimmed leather armor, holy symbols hanging from their necks. The leader, a man with a scarred face and eyes like flint, held a silver-tipped crossbow pointed casually at Ravencroft's chest. We have witnesses, the hunter was saying, his voice carrying through the vast space. A vampire matching your description was seen fleeing the scene. Dark hair, aristocratic features, expensive clothing. A description that fits half the vampire lords in this region. Ravencroft replied coolly. Hardly conclusive evidence. Perhaps not. The hunter smiled without warmth. But you're the only one who lives within striking distance of all 3 attack sites. The pattern is clear, Lord Ravencroft. You've been hunting. Eleanor felt rage spike through the bond, hot and immediate, before Ravencroft wrestled it back under control. I have not left this estate in 6 weeks. My staff can confirm. Your human servants? Another hunter laughed. Who would say anything you compelled them to say? We need real proof, vampire, and until you provide it, you're coming with us. The crossbow lifted, aiming true. Eleanor moved without thinking. She stepped into the hall, her footsteps echoing on marble, and every eye turned toward her. Through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's horror and fury in equal measure, but she ignored both, focusing instead on projecting calm authority, something she'd learned watching her father deal with difficult patients. He couldn't have committed these murders, Eleanor said clearly, because he was with me. The silence that followed was absolute. The lead hunter's eyes narrowed. And who are you? Eleanor Ashford, daughter of Marcus Ashford. She moved to stand beside Ravencroft, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Lord Ravencroft has been treating me for a rare blood condition. I've been under his care for the past month. It wasn't entirely a lie. The poison had been a blood condition, and he had treated her. She just omitted certain crucial details. Treating you? The hunter's gaze swept over her with obvious suspicion. How generous of him. And I suppose you'll swear to his innocence? I'll swear to his whereabouts, Eleanor corrected. Which is all that matters for your investigation. He was here, with me, during the times of these attacks. Unless your witnesses can prove otherwise, you have no grounds to arrest him. The hunter stepped closer, and Eleanor caught the scent of silver and consecrated oil. You're very brave, girl. Or very foolish. Do you have any idea what you're protecting? Yes, Eleanor said simply. A man who saved my life when no one else could. A man? The hunter's laugh was cruel. He's not a man-child. He's a monster wearing a man's face. And if you've let him touch you, drink from you, bind you to him. His eyes caught something on Eleanor's neck, some mark she hadn't known was there. Oh, you poor, damned fool. Ravencroft moved then, placing himself between Eleanor and the hunter with liquid speed. Enough. You've made your accusations and received your answers. Now leave my home. Or what? The hunter raised his crossbow. You'll prove us right by attacking? Or I'll invoke the Treaty of Ashenmoor, Ravencroft said coldly, which gives me the right to defend my household against unlawful intrusion. You have no warrant, no proof, and no authority here. Leave. Now. For a long moment, the hall balanced on a knife's edge. Then the lead hunter lowered his weapon. This isn't over, Ravencroft. We'll be watching. And when you slip, because you will slip, we'll be there. He gestured to his companions, and they filed out, boots echoing on stone. The moment the doors closed, Ravencroft rounded on Eleanor. What? He said, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. Were you thinking? Eleanor met his furious gaze without flinching. I was thinking that I wasn't going to let them take you, for crimes you didn't commit. You could have been killed. So could you. Eleanor's own anger flared. Or did you expect me to hide while you faced them alone? Yes. The word exploded from him. That's exactly what I expected. You're mortal, Eleanor. Fragile. If they'd decided to test their silver on you, then you would have stopped them, Eleanor interrupted. The same way you've been stopping yourself from feeding without permission, from compelling your servants, from becoming the monster they want you to be. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart, the heart that no longer beat. I know what you are, Ravencroft, and I'm not afraid. His hands came up to grip her shoulders, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to hold her in place. You should be, he whispered. Why? Because you want to protect me? Eleanor smiled sadly. I have news for you, my lord. Protection goes both ways. Something in his expression cracked, and he pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. You're going to destroy me, he murmured again, and this time it sounded less like an accusation and more like a prayer. Through the bond, Eleanor felt his terror and wonder and desperate, aching need. She held him tighter, and outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Ravencroft released her abruptly, stepping back as if her touch burned. You shouldn't have done that, he said, his voice raw. Revealed yourself to them. Now they'll investigate you, your father, everything. They'll discover the connection and use it against us both. Eleanor's hand drifted to her neck, feeling for the mark the hunter had seen. Her fingers found raised skin, 2 small punctures, already healing but unmistakable. When did you? During the blood exchange. Ravencroft wouldn't meet her eyes. You were unconscious at the end. The venom in my bite accelerates healing, helps the bond take hold. I should have asked permission first. I should have. Stop, Eleanor crossed to him, forcing him to look at her. Stop apologizing for saving my life. It's not just your life anymore, Eleanor. Don't you understand? His hand cupped her face with aching gentleness. That mark brands you as mine in the eyes of every supernatural creature in the region. Other vampires will see you as claimed territory. Hunters will see you as corrupted. You'll never be safe in the mortal world again. The weight of what he was saying settled over her like a shroud. Her old life already shattered by her father's death, and the auction was now completely unreachable. She couldn't return to her village, couldn't seek work as a healer, couldn't exist in human society without questions she could never answer. But strangely, the thought didn't terrify her as much as it should have. Then I'll be safe here, she said simply. With you. For how long? His thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch reverent and devastating. A year? 5 years? Eventually you'll resent this cage. Resent me for trapping you in it. You didn't trap me. I chose. Eleanor caught his wrist, holding his hand against her face. I'm still choosing. Through the bond, she felt his control fracturing centuries of discipline crumbling beneath the weight of hope and fear, and something deeper that neither of them had named yet. Eleanor, he whispered, her name a plea and a warning. The distance between them evaporated. His mouth found hers with desperate hunger, and Eleanor gasped at the sensation. Ice and fire, gentleness and possession, 300 years of loneliness pouring into a single kiss. His fangs grazed her lower lip, sharp enough to sting, and the bond flared like lightning between them. She felt what he felt. The intoxicating warmth of her living body against his eternal cold, the thundering of her heartbeat resonating through him like drums, the taste of her honey and medicine, and courage flooding his senses after centuries of nothing but blood and ash. And beneath it, of all, the terrifying realization that she had become necessary to him in a way nothing had been for longer than most civilizations had existed. Eleanor pulled back, breathless, and found him watching her with eyes gone full silver. "We can't," he said hoarsely, even as his arms tightened around her waist. "You're vulnerable right now. The bond makes everything more intense. You don't know what you truly want." "I want you," Eleanor interrupted. "Is that clear enough?" His laugh was broken, beautiful. "You want the fantasy. The romantic vampire lord who saves the damsel. Not the reality of what I am, what I'll always be. Then show me." Eleanor tilted her head, bearing the marks on her neck. "Stop hiding behind noble restraint and show me the reality." Ravencroft's control snapped. He backed her against the wall with preternatural speed, caging her with his body, his face buried in the curve of her neck where his mark still lingered. His breath unnecessary, theatrical, but somehow essential, ghosted over her skin. "You want to know what I am?" His voice was gravel and darkness. "I'm hunger given form. 3 centuries of deprivation wearing a gentleman's mask. I dream about the taste of you, Eleanor. Not just your blood, though, gods help me. I crave that too, but all of you. Your warmth, your stubbornness, your ridiculous bravery." His fangs pressed against her pulse, not breaking skin but present. "I want to devour you and cherish you in equal measure, and that contradiction is driving me to madness." Eleanor's hands fisted in his hair, holding him in place. Through the bond, she felt his hunger vast and terrible and carefully controlled, but also his tenderness, his fear of hurting her, his desperate need to be gentle with this one precious thing fate had granted him. "Then have me," she whispered. "I'm not afraid of your hunger. You should be." But his mouth was moving along her jaw, mapping the architecture of her face with devastating attention. He could drain you dry in minutes, could make you forget your own name with compulsion, could break you in a dozen ways without even trying. But you won't." Eleanor turned her head, catching his mouth with hers. "Because despite 300 years of being a monster, you're still choosing to be a man." The kiss deepened, turned desperate. His hands spanned her waist, lifting her effortlessly as her legs wrapped around him. The world narrowed to sensation, his cold solidity against her feverish warmth, the careful restraint in his strength, the way he kissed her like she was air and he was drowning. A door slammed somewhere in the castle. Ravencroft tore himself away, setting her down with shaking hands. "Margot," he said unnecessarily, his voice wrecked. "She's looking for you." Eleanor leaned against the wall, trying to remember how breathing worked. Convenient timing. Intentional timing. His smile was crooked, almost boyish. "I asked her to interrupt if we were gone too long. I don't trust myself around you, Eleanor. Not yet. Maybe I don't want you to trust yourself." Eleanor straightened her dress, aware of how thoroughly disheveled she must look. "Maybe I like you dangerous. Careful what you wish for." Ravencroft's eyes were still silver, still hungry. "I'm trying very hard to be honorable. Don't make it harder than it already is." Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside Margot, approaching with deliberate noise to warn them. Eleanor crossed to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. "Ravencroft?" "Yes? Thank you for stopping." She looked back at him, this ancient creature whose control was costing him dearly. "Even though I didn't want you to." His expression softened into something achingly tender. "Ask me again in a month, when the bond has settled and your judgment is your own, if you still want me then." He trailed off, vulnerability written across every line of his immortal face. "I will," Eleanor promised. "Still want you, I mean, you say that now, I'll say it then too." She opened the door as Margot's knock sounded. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, Lord Ravencroft." She slipped out before he could respond. But through the bond, she felt his emotions like a symphony, hope and terror, and something that felt dangerously close to love. Margot waited in the corridor, her expression knowing. The hunters are camped at the forest edge. They're not leaving. Eleanor's brief moment of warmth evaporated. "What do they want?" "Proof," Margot said grimly. "One way or another. And if they can't find evidence of Lord Ravencroft's guilt..." She hesitated. "They'll manufacture it." Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. "Then we find the real killer first." "Miss Ashford," Vampire hunting is dangerous even for trained. I'm not suggesting we hunt vampires. Eleanor's mind was already racing ahead, drawing connections her medical training had prepared her for. I'm suggesting we investigate murders, and I happen to know quite a bit about death. Through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's attention snap toward her and his reluctant, dangerous pride. Margot looked between Eleanor and the closed door, then sighed. You're both going to get yourselves killed. Probably, Eleanor agreed. But not today. She started toward her chamber, already planning, and behind her, she heard Ravencroft's low laugh through the door. The hunters wanted proof? She'd give them proof, just not the kind they expected. Eleanor spread the stolen reports across the library table, her father's medical texts stacked beside them for reference. She'd convinced Margot to borrow the hunters' case files while they made camp a task the housekeeper had accomplished with surprising efficiency and even more surprising enthusiasm. Now Eleanor pored over the documents, searching for patterns the Order had missed in their eagerness to blame the nearest vampire. 3 families, she murmured, tracing the timeline. All merchants, all killed within a month, all. She paused, something catching her attention. All found with their valuables untouched. Ravencroft emerged from the shadows behind her. She was learning to sense his approach now, a cold pressure against her awareness through the bond. Vampires rarely steal coin. We have little use for mortal currency. Exactly. Eleanor tapped the document. But these weren't random killings. Look at the wounds. Throats torn, yes, but also, she pointed to the coroner's notes. Defensive injuries, scratches, bite marks on the forearms where they tried to protect themselves. Fledglings, Ravencroft said immediately, understanding dawning in his expression. A new vampire, untrained and savage. An experienced vampire kills cleanly. We don't. Play with our food. The clinical way he said it should have disturbed Eleanor. Instead, she found herself nodding, matching his analytical tone. And there's something else. Each family had recently traveled through Thornwood Pass. Look, the dates match. They all returned to their respective towns within days of each other. Ravencroft leaned over her shoulder, his cold presence at her back oddly comforting. His finger traced the route marked on the map. Thornwood Pass, the old smuggler's road. Is there something there? Some vampire territory? No. His voice turned grim. There's something worse. An abandoned monastery where the church used to imprison rogue vampires before the treaty. If someone's using it to create fledglings, they'd have access to victims passing through, and a ready scapegoat in you. Eleanor turned to face him. Someone's framing you deliberately. Through the bond, she felt his cold fury crystallizing into deadly purpose. Which means someone wants me dead, or discredited badly enough to murder innocents. Who would benefit from your death? Ravencroft's jaw tightened. More vampires than I care to name. I've made enemies in my 3 centuries, those who see my adherence to the treaty as weakness, those who resent my territory, those who... He paused. Those who want what I have. Which is? Power, influence, this estate. His eyes met hers. And now, apparently, you. The possessiveness in his tone sent heat through her veins, despite the gravity of the situation. Then we find who's creating fledglings and stop them before the hunters can use this as an excuse to break the treaty. We? Ravencroft's hand found her chin, tilting her face up. Eleanor, if I'm right about who's behind this... A knock shattered the moment. Margot entered without waiting for acknowledgement, her face pale. They're back. The hunters. And they've brought someone with them. The girl couldn't have been more than 16. She stood between 2 hunters in the great hall, her dress torn and bloody, her eyes glazed with terror. When she saw Ravencroft descending the stairs, she screamed. That's him. That's the monster who killed my family. Eleanor's heart lurched. Through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's shock and rage in equal measure, but his face remained impassive as he addressed the lead hunter. I've never seen this child before in my life. Liar. The girl lunged forward, held back only by the hunter's grip. You came to our home 3 nights ago. You killed my mother, my father, my little brother. You... Her voice broke into sobs. The lead hunter's smile was triumphant. Still claim you haven't left the estate, Lord Ravencroft? Eleanor descended the stairs, her medical training overriding emotion. Something was wrong. The The girl's pupils were dilated far beyond what fear would cause, and her skin had a grayish cast that spoke of, "She's been poisoned," Eleanor announced. Every eye turned to her. "Look at her." Eleanor gestured to the girl. "Belladonna poisoning, if I'm not mistaken. It causes hallucinations, confusion, memory distortion. She doesn't know what she saw." "Convenient diagnosis," the hunter sneered. "From his pet healer. Then examine her yourself." Eleanor's voice rang with authority. "Check her pupils, her pulse, the tremor in her hands. I'm a physician's daughter. I know poison when I see it." The lead hunter hesitated, then gestured to one of his companions. The woman approached the girl, conducting a quick examination. Her expression shifted from skepticism to uncertainty. "She's right," the huntress admitted. "The symptoms match." "Which proves nothing," the lead hunter snapped, "except that someone poisoned the witness. Perhaps to silence her? Or to manufacture a witness," Ravencroft countered coldly. "Tell me, girl, what did this vampire look like?" The girl's eyes struggled to focus. Dark hair, tall, cold eyes. He wore black, like a lord. "A description," Eleanor interjected. "That matches dozens of vampires. That matches half the aristocracy in the region, if we're being honest." She moved closer to the girl, gentling her voice. "Child, did you actually see his face clearly? Or did you see a shape in the darkness that someone told you was Lord Ravencroft?" The girl's face crumpled with confusion. There was darkness. And then someone was asking me questions. And they said, "They told you what you saw," Eleanor finished gently. "Someone poisoned you, manipulated you, and sent you here as false proof." "This is absurd," the lead hunter drew his crossbow. "You expect us to believe this elaborate conspiracy theory over a survivor's testimony? I expect you to follow the evidence," Ravencroft said, his voice deadly quiet. "And the evidence suggests someone is using you as their weapon. Someone who wants me dead or imprisoned, who's willing to murder innocents and poison children to achieve it." Eleanor felt the tension in the hall drawing taut as a bowstring. Through the bond, she sensed Ravencroft calculating angles, escape routes, the probability of violence. Then a new voice spoke from the doorway. "He's telling the truth." Everyone turned to see a figure in the shadows, tall, elegant, with copper hair and eyes like autumn fire. Another vampire, Eleanor realized with a shock, but this one radiated a different kind of power. Older, perhaps. More dangerous. "Lady Morvaine," Ravencroft said, surprise evident in his tone. "What are you doing here?" The vampire woman stepped into the light, her gaze sweeping the room with casual disdain, "Cleaning up the mess my idiot progeny created before it starts a war." She looked at the lead hunter. "The fledgling responsible for these murders is named Adrian. I created him 2 months ago, and he escaped my supervision. He's been hiding in the Thornwood Monastery, preying on travelers and wearing Lord Ravencroft's cast-off clothing to implicate him." "Why should we believe you?" the hunter demanded. "Because I'm bringing you his head." Lady Morvaine dropped a sack at the hunter's feet. Something round and heavy rolled inside it. It's been destroyed, as is my responsibility under the treaty. The killings will stop, and you'll leave Lord Ravencroft alone unless you want to explain to the council why you ignored evidence in favor of vendetta." The silence that followed was absolute. The lead hunter stared at the sack, then at Lady Morvaine, then at Ravencroft. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his crossbow. "This isn't over," he said quietly, "but we'll investigate the monastery, if your story checks out." "It will," Lady Morvaine said with bored certainty. "Now take the girl to a proper healer and get out. Some of us have more important matters to attend to." The hunters retreated, taking the poisoned girl with them. The moment the doors closed, Lady Morvaine's attention fixed on Eleanor with predatory interest. "So," she purred, "this is the mortal who's captured the uncapturable Lord Ravencroft's attention. How delicious." Through the bond, Eleanor felt Ravencroft's protective fury spike. "Why are you really here, Morvaine?" he asked coldly. The vampire woman's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because the game has changed, Ravencroft, and you need to know what you've stumbled into by claiming her." Eleanor's hand found Ravencroft's, their fingers lacing together instinctively. "What game?" she demanded. Lady Morvaine's eyes gleamed with dangerous amusement. "The one where your bloodline makes you far more valuable than either of you realize and far more endangered." Lady Morvaine circled Eleanor like a predator assessing prey. You don't know, do you? The vampire woman's laugh was silver bells and poison. Neither of you have any idea what she is. Ravencroft moved between them, his body a shield. Explain. Now. So protective already. Morvaine's smile widened. How long has it been since you felt this strongly about anything, old friend? 2 centuries? 3? She waved a dismissive hand. But I'm not here to mock. I'm here because Adrian wasn't acting alone, and the real architect of this frame-up won't stop just because one fledgling's been destroyed. Eleanor stepped around Ravencroft, despite his obvious displeasure. You said something about my bloodline. What did you mean? Morvaine's expression shifted, becoming almost respectful. Brave little mortal. Very well. She produced a leather journal from her coat, its pages yellowed with age. I've been researching your family since Ravencroft made his very public purchase at the auction. The name Ashford rang familiar, so I dug through old records. Do you know what I found? My father was a physician, Eleanor said. Nothing more. Your father. Yes. But your mother? Morvaine opened the journal, revealing genealogical charts written in cramped script. Your mother was born Lydia Thorne, the Thorne family before they fled into obscurity and changed their name to something more common, were the last living descendants of Saint Caterina the Lightbringer. The name meant nothing to Eleanor, but through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's shock like a physical blow. That's impossible, he whispered. The Thorne line died out during the purge. Most of it did, Morvaine agreed, but one branch survived by hiding their heritage, marrying into common families, suppressing their gifts. Her eyes fixed on Eleanor. Tell me, girl, have you ever healed someone by touch? Made plants grow faster? Found that injuries closed more quickly around you than they should? Eleanor's mind raced back through memories. Her father's patients who recovered inexplicably when she assisted him. The herb garden that thrived under her care when her neighbors withered. The time she'd cut herself badly, and the wound had sealed overnight, leaving barely a scar. I thought it was coincidence, she breathed. There's no such thing as coincidence where bloodlines are concerned. Morvaine snapped the journal shut. Saint Caterina was vampire-born, one of the rare mortals sired by a vampire who retained their humanity and developed divine gifts instead of turning. Her blood carried properties that could heal, purify, and most importantly bind vampires to their better natures. That's why Adrian's master wanted Ravencroft framed. Eleanor realized, the pieces falling into place, not just to remove a political rival, but to claim you, Ravencroft finished, his voice rough. A vampire bound to someone with thorn blood wouldn't just be healed of bloodlust or darkness. They'd be transformed, potentially made daywalker, given back their humanity without losing their power. Exactly. Morvaine's expression turned grave. You're not just valuable, Eleanor Ashford. You're priceless. And every vampire in 3 kingdoms will want to possess you once word spreads. The room tilted. Eleanor groped for a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. How many know? Only a few, for now. Adrian knew, which means his master knows. I know. And whatever hunters are clever enough to research, properly will figure it out soon enough. Morvaine moved to the window, gazing out at the forest where the Order's camp still glowed. You have 2 choices. Hide her away where no one will find her, becoming her prison as much as her protector. Or what? Ravencroft demanded. Morvaine turned, and for the first time, Eleanor saw genuine concern in those ancient eyes. Or complete the bond, make her vampire-born like Caterina was. Give her the strength to defend herself, and the immortality to outlast her enemies. No. Ravencroft's refusal was immediate and absolute. I won't condemn her to this existence, even to save her life, Morvaine pressed. Because make no mistake, they will come for her. The old families, the rogue covens, the vampires who see the treaty as a chain rather than salvation. They'll tear through this estate to claim her, and you can't fight them all. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. Through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's anguish the impossible. Choice between condemning her to mortality's dangers or immortality's curse. There has to be another way, she said quietly. There isn't. Morvaine's voice held unexpected gentleness. I've lived for 5 centuries, child. I've seen every possible outcome of situations like this. You're marked now by blood, by bond, by heritage. The only question is whether you'll have the power to choose your own fate or be forced into someone else's design. Eleanor stood, moving to where Ravencroft stood rigid with tension. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling the emptiness where a heartbeat should be. What would it mean? She asked him directly. To complete the bond? To become vampire-born? His hand covered hers, cold and trembling. It means drinking my blood until your heart stops and something else restarts it. It means dying and being reborn into darkness. It means watching everyone you knew grow old while you remain frozen. His voice cracked. It means becoming like me, trapped between life and death, never fully either. But I'd be strong enough to fight? Yes. And I'd still be myself? Still have choices? More than you do now, Morvain interjected. Vampire-born retain their souls, their morality. You'd gain strength, speed, immortality, but keep your humanity intact. It's why Katerina could become a saint. Eleanor looked up at Ravencroft, reading the torment in his storm-gray eyes. You don't want this for me. I want you alive, he said hoarsely, but not at the cost of everything that makes you who you are. Then let me choose. Eleanor rose on her toes, bringing her face close to his. Trust me to know my own mind. Trust me to decide my own fate. Eleanor, do you love me? The question escaped before she could stop it. Raw and demanding. Ravencroft's control shattered. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch reverent despite his obvious turmoil. Yes. God help me, yes. In 300 years I've never felt anything like what I feel for you. It's consuming me, terrifying me, and I don't know. Eleanor kissed him, swallowing his words, tasting his fear and love, and desperate hope. When she pulled back, her decision was made. Then I choose this, she whispered. I choose strength. I choose immortality. I choose you for as long as forever lasts. You're condemning yourself, he protested weakly. No. Eleanor's smile was fierce. I'm freeing myself. From mortality's weakness, from being prey, from letting others decide my worth. She looked at Morvain. How do we do this? Morvain's expression held something like approval. The transformation requires 3 exchanges of blood over 3 nights, with the 3rd taking her to the edge of death and beyond. It's agonizing, dangerous, and irreversible. She paused. And it must begin tonight, before Ravencroft's enemies move against you. Through the bond, Eleanor felt Ravencroft's resistance warring with his protective instincts. She squeezed his hand, letting him feel her certainty, her trust, her absolute lack of fear. I'm not afraid, she told him again. Not of death, not of darkness, not of what I'll become. I'm only afraid of being too weak to stay beside you. Something broke in his expression, some final wall crumbling into dust. Then I'll give you strength, he whispered, and pray you forgive me for it. There's nothing to forgive. Eleanor turned to Morvain. Tell us what we need to do. The vampire woman's smile was sharp and satisfied. First, we prepare the ritual chamber. Then, her eyes glinted with dark promise. Then we see if the physician's daughter is brave enough to die and be reborn. Eleanor met her gaze without flinching. Try me, she said. And somewhere in the forest, something ancient and hungry felt the shift in fate's design and began moving toward Ravencroft Manor with murder in its heart. The game had changed. Now it was time to play. The ritual chamber lay deep beneath the castle, carved from living rock. Eleanor descended the spiral stairs with Ravencroft's hand steady at her back, each step taking her further from the mortal world she'd known. Candles lined the walls, hundreds of them, their flames casting writhing shadows that seemed almost alive. At the chamber's center stood a stone altar draped in black silk. This is where it happens, Morvain said, her voice echoing off ancient walls. Where vampires are made, where the dying are transformed, where mortality surrenders to eternity. She gestured to the altar. Lie down, Eleanor Ashford. Let's see if your bloodline's legacy can survive what comes next. Eleanor's steps didn't falter, but through the bond, Ravencroft felt her fear sharp and bright beneath her courage. He caught her wrist, pulling her back. You can still change your mind, he said desperately. We'll find another way. I'll protect you, hide you, fight anyone who... You can't fight the entire vampire world. Eleanor's hand found his face, her warmth a benediction against his cold skin. And I won't spend eternity running. This is my choice, Ravencroft. Let me make it. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch as if memorizing the heat of her. If something goes wrong, then I'll die knowing I tried to become strong enough to stand beside you. Her smile was sad and fierce. That's more than most mortals can say. She kissed him once soft, lingering, goodbye and promise tangled together, then climbed onto the altar before her courage could fail. The silk was cool beneath her, and the stone radiated a cold that seemed to seep into her bones. Eleanor stared up at the vaulted ceiling, where strange symbols had been carved centuries ago, their meaning lost to time. Morvain appeared at her side, holding a silver chalice. The first exchange is the easiest. You'll drink his blood, enough to forge the connection deeper than what you already share. Your body will fight it, fever, pain, visions, but you'll survive. And the second? Eleanor asked. The second feeding takes you to the edge. You'll feel death's approach, taste its cold kiss. Your heart will slow, your breath will shallow. You'll exist between worlds. Morvain's expression was grave. Many don't survive the second night. The pull of death is strong, and not everyone has the will to cling to life. And the third? The third is death itself. Ravencroft moved to the other side of the altar, his face pale even for a vampire. I'll drain you until your heart stops, then feed you my blood until something new awakens in your veins. Either you'll rise vampire-born, or... He couldn't finish. Or I won't rise at all, Eleanor completed softly. I understand. Do you? His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together with desperate strength. Do you understand that I've lived 300 years without losing anyone who mattered because I never let anyone matter? That the thought of you dying on this altar is tearing me apart? Through the bond, Eleanor felt his anguish like her own centuries of loneliness breaking open to reveal the raw wound beneath. Then don't let me die alone, she whispered. Stay with me. Through all of it. His jaw clenched. Always. Morvain handed him an ornate dagger, its blade etched with the same symbols that marked the ceiling. Begin when you're ready. I'll keep watch outside. There are enemies who'll sense what we're doing and come to interfere. She swept from the chamber, leaving them in candlelit isolation. Ravencroft stared at the dagger as if it were a venomous snake. I've killed with blades like this, ended lives, spilled blood, but I've never... He looked at Eleanor, his eyes haunted. I've never done this, never tried to create instead of destroy. Then we'll learn together. Eleanor's voice was steady despite the fear thrumming through her veins. Cut your wrist, let me drink, and stop looking at me like I'm already dead. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn. You wouldn't want me any other way. He pressed the blade to his wrist, and dark blood welled up almost black in the candlelight, ancient and potent. He brought it to her lips. Drink, he commanded softly, and hold on to me when it hurts. Eleanor drank. The blood hit her system like lightning. Her back arched off the altar as power flooded through her raw, overwhelming, burning away her mortality one cell at a time. She felt Ravencroft's essence merging with hers, felt 3 centuries of accumulated darkness seeking purchase in her soul. But beneath the darkness, something else. Light. Her bloodline's gift activating, pushing back against the shadows, transforming them into something neither wholly dark nor light, but balanced between extremes. Pain exploded through her body. Eleanor screamed, her hands clutching Ravencroft's arm hard enough that her nails drew blood even through his supernatural resilience. Her veins felt like they were filled with molten silver, her bones like they were breaking and reforming, her heart stuttering in her chest as it tried to decide whether to keep beating. Stay with me, Ravencroft urged, his free hand cradling her face. Eleanor, stay with me. Fight through it. She tried to answer but couldn't form words. The visions came next, flashes of his past pouring into her consciousness. She saw his human life, brief and brutal. Saw the vampire who'd turned him, beautiful and cruel. Saw the first kill he'd made, the horror and hunger tangled together. Saw centuries of blood and darkness and the slow, agonizing journey toward redemption. And beneath it all, she saw his hope for her, the desperate, fragile belief that she could be different, could be saved from the worst of what he'd become. I don't need saving, she thought fiercely, pushing the thought through the bond. I need to be strong enough to save myself. His laugh was broken, relieved. Then be strong, brave fool. Be stronger than me. The pain crested, peaked, then slowly receded like a terrible tide. Eleanor's body went limp against the altar, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Her vision blurred, refocused, and she realized she could see better now. The candle flames were sharper, the shadows deeper, every detail in the stone ceiling crystalline and precise. How do you feel? Ravencroft asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Eleanor took inventory. Her heart still beat faster now, stronger. Her lungs still drew breath. But something fundamental had shifted. She felt powerful in ways she'd never experienced, aware of her body with preternatural clarity. Different, she managed. Like I'm more myself and less myself all at once. The first transformation. His smile was relief and dread mingled. Tomorrow night, we go deeper. A crash echoed from above the sound of splintering wood, and Morvaine's sharp cry of warning. They're here, Ravencroft said grimly, helping Eleanor sit up despite her weakness. Whoever's. Behind the frame-up. They've come to stop the transformation. Eleanor's hand found the dagger on the altar, her new strength allowing her to lift it without trembling. Then let them come. Through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's fierce pride and terrible fear in equal measure. Can you fight? He asked. Eleanor's smile was sharp with borrowed darkness and inherited light. Only one way to find out. They rose together as footsteps thundered down the stairs, multiple intruders, moving with supernatural speed. The first death had been survived. Now came the true test, staying alive long enough to reach the second. The first attacker burst through the chamber entrance with inhuman speed. Eleanor barely registered the movement before Ravencroft intercepted, his body a blur of shadow and violence. The two vampires collided with bone-crushing force, tumbling across the stone floor in a tangle of fangs and fury. 3 more followed vampires dressed in dark leather, their eyes burning, crimson with bloodlust. One peeled away from the group, heading straight for Eleanor with predatory focus. The Thorn Girl, he hissed, his voice like gravel. Lord Constantine sends his regards. Eleanor raised the ritual dagger, her newly enhanced senses tracking his approach with startling clarity. Time seemed to slow as he lunged, and she saw the opening a gap in his guard, where his throat met his shoulder. She struck. The blade sank deep, and the vampire shrieked, stumbling back. Silver-laced, Eleanor realized. The ritual dagger was designed to harm supernatural creatures. Dark blood poured from the wound, and the vampire clutched at his neck, his eyes wide with shock. You're just mortal. Not anymore, Eleanor said, and was disturbed by how steady her voice sounded. Morvaine appeared in the doorway, her elegant facade shattered into something feral and deadly. She caught one attacker by the throat, slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack stone. Constantine's dogs, she snarled. I should have known he'd move this quickly. Who is Constantine? Eleanor shouted over the chaos, backing toward the altar as another vampire circled her. Old money, older grudges, Morvaine replied, snapping her captive's neck with casual efficiency. He thinks himself the rightful ruler of this territory. He wants Ravencroft dead and you claimed for his own purposes. The vampire stalking Eleanor lunged. She dodged faster than humanly possible, her body responding with supernatural grace, and slashed with the dagger. The blade caught his arm, and he howled in pain, but she wasn't fast enough. His backhand sent her flying across the chamber. Eleanor crashed into the altar, pain exploding through her ribs. The dagger skittered from her grip, sliding across the floor toward the shadows. Through the bond, she felt Ravencroft's rage ignite like wildfire. He tore himself away from his opponent with savage strength, leaving the other vampire clutching. A ruined shoulder. In 3 strides he reached Eleanor's attacker, and what followed was brutal, efficient, and utterly merciless. Ravencroft's hands closed around the vampire's head and twisted. The sound of snapping vertebrae echoed through the chamber, and the body crumpled to dust ancient enough that death brought immediate disintegration. Touch her again, Ravencroft said to the remaining attackers, his voice a promise of annihilation. And I'll show you why I survived 3 centuries while better vampires fell. The 2 surviving intruders exchanged glances, then fled with supernatural speed. Morvaine moved to pursue, but Ravencroft stopped her with a gesture. Let them run. Let them tell Constantine what they faced. Eleanor struggled to her feet, one hand pressed to her aching ribs. Already she could feel them healing, knitting back together with unnatural speed. The first transformation was working faster than expected. Ravencroft was beside her in an instant, his hands moving over her injuries with careful assessment. Nothing broken, but you should have stayed behind me. I'm not a porcelain doll. Eleanor interrupted, wincing as her ribs shifted. I can fight. You almost got yourself killed. So did you. Eleanor pushed his hands away, anger flaring hot and immediate. Don't coddle me. If I'm going to survive in this world, your world, I need to learn how to fight, not hide behind you like some helpless damsel. Morvaine's laugh cut through their argument. She has spirit. I like her. She moved to examine the dust piles that marked the fallen vampires. But the girl's right, Ravencroft. Constantine won't stop with one failed attack. He'll send everything he has. Then we accelerate the transformation, Ravencroft said grimly. Tonight we complete the second exchange. It's too soon, Morvaine protested. Her body hasn't fully adjusted to the first. We don't have time for caution. He turned to Eleanor, his expression fierce. Can you do this? Tonight? Eleanor's ribs throbbed, her body ached, and exhaustion pulled at her like lead weights. But through the bond, she felt Constantine's forces gathering in the darkness beyond the estate, felt the noose tightening around them. Yes, she said simply. Morvaine's gaze moved between them, something like respect flickering in her ancient eyes. Very well. But understand the second exchange will hurt worse than the first. Much worse. You'll feel death's approach, Eleanor. You'll want to surrender to it. The only thing that will keep you tethered to life is him. She nodded toward Ravencroft. Your bond, your connection. If that breaks, you're lost. Eleanor moved to Ravencroft, taking his cold hands in hers. Then it won't break. His fingers tightened on hers. Eleanor, don't. She pressed her hand to his chest, over his silent heart. Don't try to talk me out of this again. We're past that now. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Through the bond, she felt his emotions crashing like storm waves, terror and pride, and love so fierce it stole her breath. He pulled her against him, his embrace desperate and tender. You're going to die tonight, he whispered against her hair. Truly die, even if only for moments. And I have to be the one who brings you to that edge. I know. I don't know if I can. You can. Eleanor pulled back to meet his eyes. Because you love me enough to do what's necessary, even when it destroys you. His laugh was broken. How did you become so brave? I learned from a vampire who chose honor over hunger for 300 years. She rose on her toes, pressing her forehead to his. Now stop stalling. We have a transformation to complete and an enemy to face. Morvaine cleared her throat. Touching. But she's right, we're on a timeline. Constantine's main force will attack before dawn. If we're going to give Eleanor the strength to survive what's coming, we need to begin the second exchange now. Eleanor returned to the altar, her body protesting every movement but her will unshakable. She lay down on the silk, watching as Ravencroft retrieved the ritual dagger with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Last chance to run, he said, attempting levity and failing. Eleanor's smile was fierce. I don't run. Not anymore. He brought the blade to his wrist. And this time, when the blood welled up, it seemed darker, heavier with purpose. He offered it to her lips like a sacrament. Drink, he commanded. And hold on to me when death comes calling. Eleanor drank deeply. The pain was immediate and catastrophic. Her back arched off the altar as her heart began to slow, each beat harder to achieve than the last. Her vision darkened at the edges, and she felt death's cold fingers reaching for her, promising peace, promising an end to the agony. Stay with me. Ravencroft's voice cut through the darkness. Eleanor, stay with me. She wanted to answer, but her lungs had forgotten how to draw. Breath. Her heart stuttered, stopped, restarted with agonizing slowness. She was dying, truly dying, and it would be so easy to let go, to surrender, to know. The thought was pure defiance. She hadn't survived poison, hadn't chosen immortality, hadn't fallen in love with a 300-year-old vampire just to die on a stone altar in the darkness. Eleanor's hand found Ravencroft's, gripping with the last of her mortal strength. Not yet, she gasped. His fierce joy flooded through the bond, anchoring her to life. That's my brave fool, he whispered. Hold on. Just hold on. Above them, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, Constantine's army, coming to finish what his scouts had started. Eleanor's heart gave one more stuttering beat. And then the true battle began. Eleanor's heartbeat was a dying drum. Each pulse came slower than the last, echoing through the ritual chamber like a countdown to oblivion. Through the haze of approaching death, she heard the clash of combat above Morvaine holding the stairs against Constantine's forces, buying them precious minutes they might not have. Eleanor. Ravencroft's voice cut through the fog, desperate and commanding. "You're slipping away. Fight!" She wanted to fight, but death was seductive in its promise of peace, its offer of silence after so much pain. Her father waited somewhere in that darkness, didn't he? And perhaps her mother, the thorn woman who'd hidden her heritage to protect her daughter from exactly this fate. No, Eleanor thought, the defiance weaker now. No, I didn't choose this to surrender. But her body wasn't listening. Her heart gave one final, shuddering beat and stopped. Silence crashed through the bond. Ravencroft felt the moment her mortality severed, felt the connection between them stretch thin as spider silk. For 3 agonizing seconds, there was nothing. No heartbeat, no breath, no life. Then he bit his own wrist savagely, tearing flesh until his ancient blood flowed, black and thick. He pressed it to her lifeless lips. "Drink," he commanded, knowing she couldn't hear him. "Damn you, Eleanor Ashford, drink and live." Above, Morvaine's voice rang out in warning. "Ravencroft, they're breaking through." He ignored her, focused entirely on the woman who lay corpse-still on the altar. His blood dripped past her pale lips, sliding down her throat by gravity alone. 1 drop, 2, 3, nothing. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please. I've lived 3 centuries without you and I won't go back to that emptiness. Come back to me." The ritual chamber doors exploded inward. Constantine swept in like a storm made flesh ancient, powerful, his presence filling the space with suffocating authority. He was beautiful in the way that apex predators were beautiful. Perfect features that promised death, eyes like molten gold that had watched empires burn. "Step away from the Thorn Girl," Constantine commanded, his voice resonating with compulsion that would have dropped a lesser vampire to their knees. Ravencroft didn't move. "No. You're outnumbered, outmatched, and protecting a corpse." Constantine's smile was cruel. The transformation failed. She's dead. But her blood, his eyes gleamed with avarice. Her blood still carries the thorn gift. I'll take what remains and use it to build an empire. Over my ashes, Ravencroft snarled, positioning himself between Constantine and Eleanor's body. Constantine gestured, and 4 vampires moved to flank him, old ones, powerful ones, their combined presence a weight that pressed against Ravencroft's senses. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've wanted an excuse to destroy you for decades." Morvaine appeared in the doorway, bleeding from a dozen wounds. "Ravencroft, there are 20 more behind me. We can't—" A heartbeat. Single, impossible, defiant. Everyone froze. Eleanor's chest rose with a gasping breath that sounded like resurrection itself. Her eyes snapped open. No longer the warm brown they'd been, but silver gray like winter storms, like Ravencroft's own gaze reflected back at him. "Can't what?" Eleanor asked, her voice resonant with new power. She sat up smoothly, every movement precise and controlled. "Can't win?" The change was immediate and undeniable. Her skin had taken on the alabaster pallor of the undead, but light seemed to emanate from beneath it, her thorn bloodline manifesting as a soft luminescence that made the vampires surrounding them flinch. Her features were sharper now, more defined, inhumanly beautiful in the way that only the vampire-born could achieve. But her eyes, those storm-gray eyes, held centuries of wisdom that hadn't been there before, as if the transformation had connected her to something ancient and vast. "Impossible," Constantine breathed. "The second exchange doesn't— you shouldn't be—" "Awake," Eleanor stood, testing her new body with obvious fascination. She was faster now. She crossed the chamber in a blur, retrieving the ritual dagger before anyone could react. Apparently, thorn blood doesn't follow traditional rules. Through the bond, Ravencroft felt her presence like sunlight breaking through clouds, powerful, radiant, undeniably alive, in ways that transcended mortality or death. The transformation was incomplete. She'd need the third exchange to become fully vampire-born, but already she was something unprecedented. Something dangerous. "Eleanor," he said, wonder and relief crashing through him. She turned, and her smile held predatory edges that made his ancient heart ache with pride. "Miss me?" "Always." Constantine's composure fractured. "Kill them both. I want the girl's heart before it stops beating again." His vampires lunged. What followed was chaos and carnage. Eleanor moved with speed that defied her incomplete transformation, the ritual dagger flashing silver as she cut through attackers with surgical precision. Her medical knowledge translated seamlessly into combat. She knew exactly where to strike to disable, where to cut to cause maximum damage. But more than that, her thorn bloodline manifested as light that seared vampire flesh like holy fire. When her blood now mixed with Ravencroft's essence splattered across her opponents, they screamed and fell back, their skin blistering where it touched. Ravencroft fought beside her with 3 centuries of experience, and through the bond, they moved in perfect synchronization. He anticipated her movements, she understood his intentions, and together they were devastating. Morvaine joined the fray with vicious efficiency, and suddenly Constantine's numerical advantage meant nothing against their coordinated assault. Within minutes, the floor was littered with bodies and dust. Constantine stood alone, his golden eyes wide with something Eleanor recognized: fear. "You can't do this," he said, his composure cracking. "I'm a lord of the old houses. There are laws, treaties, which you violated when you murdered innocents to frame me." Ravencroft interrupted coldly. "When you sent assassins to my home, when you tried to steal what's mine. The girl isn't yours." "I'm not anyone's," Eleanor said, pressing the dagger to Constantine's throat, "but I choose him. And if you ever threaten what's mine again, I'll show you exactly what thorn blood can do when it's angry." Light flared from her hand, pure, burning, holy light that made Constantine scream. The smell of charred flesh filled the chamber. "Mercy," he gasped. "Please." "Mercy?" Eleanor's laugh was sharp. "Like the mercy you showed those merchant families? Like the mercy you plan to show me?" She glanced at Ravencroft. "What do the old laws say about vampire lords who break the treaty?" "Execution," Ravencroft said quietly, "or eternal imprisonment." Eleanor studied Constantine with cold assessment, and Ravencroft saw the physician's daughter calculating outcomes, weighing justice against vengeance. Finally, she pulled the dagger back. "Imprisonment," she decided. "Let him rot in whatever hole vampires use for criminals. Let him spend eternity remembering how he was defeated by a girl not even fully transformed." Morvaine's smile was approving, wise and cruel. "I definitely like her." She hauled Constantine to his feet. "I'll take him to the council. They'll be very interested to hear about his treaty violations." As Morvaine dragged the defeated vampire lord from the chamber, Eleanor's strength finally gave out. She swayed, and Ravencroft caught her, cradling her against his chest. "I did it," she whispered, exhaustion crashing through the bond. "I fought. I won. You were magnificent." He carried her back to the altar, settling her gently on the silk. "But the transformation isn't complete. Tomorrow night, I finish it." Eleanor's hand found his face, tracing the sharp planes with newfound understanding. "No more hesitation. No more doubts. I want this. Ravencroft. I want eternity with you." His throat tightened. "You'll lose your mortality, your warmth, the ability to walk in sunlight or taste mortal food. You'll watch the world change while you remain frozen. And eventually, I'll have you," Eleanor interrupted. "And that's worth every sacrifice." She pulled him down until their foreheads touched. Ask me properly what I want." Ravencroft understood what she was demanding. Not a clinical discussion of transformation logistics, but something deeper. Something mortal in its vulnerability despite their supernatural context. He knelt beside the altar, taking her hand in both of his. "Eleanor Ashford," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "will you forsake mortality? Will you drink from my veins until death claims you, then rise vampire-born to walk beside me through eternity? Will you become my equal, my companion, his voice broke, "my love?" Through the bond, Eleanor felt the weight of what he was, offering not possession or ownership, but partnership. True partnership, forged in blood and battle, and 300 years of loneliness finally ended. "Yes," she said simply. "To all of it. Yes." His kiss was reverent, desperate, filled with centuries of hoping for something he'd never believed he'd find. When he pulled back, tears impossible, vampire tears tracked down his face. "Tomorrow night," he promised. "Tomorrow night, I'll make you immortal. And then we build something worth living forever for," Eleanor finished. She pulled him onto the altar beside her, and they lay there as the candles burned. Low vampire lord and dying mortal turned something more, connected by blood and choice and love that transcended death itself. Above, dawn was still hours away. But for the first time in 300 years, Ravencroft found himself looking forward to another night. 3 months later, Eleanor stood at the castle's highest window, watching the sunrise. She couldn't step into its light, not anymore. The third exchange had completed her transformation, and with it came the vampire's curse. Sunlight meant death, but her thorn bloodline granted her something unprecedented. She could look upon dawn without pain, could feel its warmth through the glass, could remember what it meant to be kissed by morning light. Ravencroft joined her, his arms circling her waist from behind. Together they watched gold spill across the horizon, painting the world in colors he hadn't seen in centuries except through her eyes. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing darkness?" Eleanor turned in his embrace, her storm-gray eyes reflecting the dawn. "I didn't choose darkness. I chose you. There's a difference." She kissed him as the sun rose higher, and through their bond, permanent now, unbreakable, they felt what they'd built together. Love that had conquered death, partnership forged in blood and battle, and the promise of forever stretching before them like an unwritten story. Outside, the world turned toward light. But here, in their castle of shadows, they had found something more valuable than any sunrise. They had found each other, and that was enough.